I would advise any procurement organization to do everything possible not to get into very long-term arrangements at the moment, because this is changing so quickly. And as you mentioned, this was just 6 months ago, and who knows how things are going to look 6 months from now. You might be investing now in a very big implementation that you think will take you for the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and you can find yourself outdated in a very, very short time. You need to make the hard decisions. You need to lead the way for your team, even if it's not the easiest way. You need to be in the tough conversations, even if it's not so pleasant. It's part of leading by example. You can't expect someone to walk the walk and talk the talk if you don't do it yourself. And you can't expect someone else to do your hard work or your unpleasant conversations if you cannot do it yourself.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement. Today, in our series of jam sessions, I'm super excited to introduce you to Limor. She's a friend of mine from the Bay Area Procurement Council. We met, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It's been a while. It's really exciting to have her on the podcast here. She brings another layer of diversity to our conversation because of her unique background in procurement. And life in general. She's super fun to talk to. So I'm really jazzed to give you an opportunity to get to know Limor. In our pre-conversations, there's just lots of really cool insights and learnings that she brings to the conversation. So I'm excited for her to share these practical insights with you as well. So Limor, I always like, before we get in here, just to talk a little bit about what got you into procurement in the first place. A couple, 2 or 3 minutes of, the deep educational program you got into to learn procurement, or what kind of triggered your destiny in procurement. Not very many of us went to school, but how did you make your way into procurement?
So I went to school, but not for procurement. Back then it wasn't very popular or didn't even exist. So I went to school for accounting, and I thought I'll become an accountant. But I had to earn my living through school. So I got a job in defense procurement during the day and went to school during the night and learned the fundamentals of procurement for the defense market sector, and fell in love with procurement. When I actually finished school, I thought I'll go and, find my accountant internship role, and I did that for 6 months. But then I realized that I got so used to working with people, working in front of people, and having so much excitement with my procurement role that it was very, very different from me in my accounting internship role, sitting in front, big binders and looking through just numbers and trying to figure out things on my own. You don't get a lot of hand-holding during your accounting internships, at least not back then. I'm sure it's different these days. But I really missed it, and I felt like it was already ingrained in me for 6 years going through school. And I just looked for the Friday newspaper. And back then there were a big ad at the last page of the newspaper. And I decided to apply for a procurement role and got back into the procurement industry.
They say be careful, you're climbing your career ladder, be careful what wall it's leaning against, right? All this work in school to get ready to be an accountant, and on the side, you're falling in love with procurement. And, but I'm sure that your accounting education and degree and everything else has really become useful as you've worked your way through. Now, because I know a little bit about you, I know where you're from, and I think I told you before, I was a soft spot in my heart for the Middle East. I spent 2 years in Kuwait as a small boy. I was just thinking about it over this weekend, actually. There's something charming and romantic and beautiful about waking up to the call of prayer off the mosques every day. Like there was a mosque right outside my apartment. So there's just lots of little nuances of the culture in the region that are just really wired into me. But when I was a boy, I went to Israel. We drove across Saudi, went to Israel from Kuwait, and I had a falafel for the first time, and it was unbelievably delicious. It changed my mom had previously been feeding me peanut butter for my whole life, and I wondered why she was abusing me. So Israel was my first taste of a falafel, and after that, it's been my go-to treat whenever I can find a really good falafel sandwich. It's just a highlight for me. But one of the things
we share our love for falafel, for good falafel.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Well,
And
one of my
procurement.
favorite places in the
Falafel
Bay
and
Area
procurement.
is Dish Dash. I've met a lot of people in the Bay Area over the years in Dish Dash, but I'm just constantly getting people pointing me to the best falafel shop anywhere. But anyway, back to the Middle East. When I was there, it was like my first exposure to really market-based, like markets, open markets and open market negotiations. And I had grown up here in Utah, and everything that my entire life had a price tag on it in one way or another. You go to the store and the little candies and little food and the vegetables, and like that's just how my life, how things were here in Utah. And then I got over there and I saw this entire different side of the economy where everyone's negotiating all of those things, at least the open market kind of things. So I suspect you had a lot of exposure just naturally and culturally to negotiations. Tell us a little bit about that. And do you think that influenced at all how you think about negotiations and managing sourcing projects?
So I grew up in Tel Aviv, and Tel Aviv is a very, very advanced city, and probably the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful cities in the world these days. So I have to say I didn't grow up in all these markets, but Israel was established and was formed from all immigrants. So everybody had to really build with their own hands, and whatever they have in life. And I think it's probably that piece of the culture that I got. I mean, nothing was handed over to me on a silver platter. I had to work through very hard all my life to get where I wanted to go, and be pretty independent with how I find my way in life. Getting a lot of support and love, but you had to work very, very hard to get where you needed to, where you wanted to get to. So, but yes, there will be markets, and in the market, it's very customary. You negotiate for everything you buy, and I would not buy anything without trying to negotiate what I buy in those markets. But I grew up in Tel Aviv, which is a very different culture.
Yeah. Well, as part of that trip, we drove through Tel Aviv. In those days, I was like 10 or 12 years old. So, and I'm sure that was in the late 80s, the late 70s, early 80s. And yeah. Anyway, I've had a couple of really cool trips to Israel, and looking forward to an opportunity to go back again. What you just described to me is a figure it out tenacity kind of mentality about life. So culturally, you grew up like nobody's going to tell you how to do it. Nobody's going to make it easy for you. You're going to have to figure it out. So let's kind of pivot that into the same question. So when you get into sourcing in a negotiation, probably in you started in this internship essentially, or this day job working in the aerodefense industry with no training. And I'm sure this figure it out. I've never bought defense industry and other related goods and services before. So you had to figure it out. Like, do you see that continuing with procurement folks? I mean, is that one of these skills that people need to bring to the job to be successful?
Yes, I think, of course, I mean, these days there's a lot of resources available for procurement folks. And when you land a job in a corporate institution, you have people that shadow you, your buddy, your your mentor. There's all these different programs that help you come up to speed on what you need to know. But I think a lot of it is you have to figure things on your own and do your own research. And I think the good procurement folks are the ones that really put their time into learning and doing the research and understanding what they come across. And in the indirect space, I mean, you can oversee, in my organization, I was overseeing 10 different categories of indirect, through my role of VP sourcing and procurement. I was not an expert in each and every one of them, but I would definitely take the time and effort needed to learn what I needed to learn in order to close the gap on anything new that came my way. Whether it was, we need to build a factory in Malaysia, or it was we need to buy a specific technology or work with the engineering teams on their development requirements and their development software. I'm not an engineer in education, but I definitely made the effort to learn what I needed to represent them well on any deal negotiation. And I think good procurement folks put the time and the energy in really understanding what are they faced with, what are they coming across, and if this is something new. And the fun thing is all these new investments, all the new stuff that is coming your way, there's no excitement with buying the same thing over and over and over again, year over year. The excitement comes from the additional budget you get for the new investments, for the new projects, for the new direction, that you can really feel like you're growing yourself with the challenges and you're learning new things. And with that, you really need to go and put the effort and learn this new area that you are coming across. When I've relocated to the U.S. with SanDisk, I was also responsible for logistics and fulfillment. I didn't do fulfillment and logistics before, and I had to put, months of hard work to really understand what was done before me. What is this about? Understand the market, understand the suppliers, understand the challenges, and put a framework of how I'm going to continue and manage that category. And when Western Digital acquired SanDisk, it was a completely new technology, new market, a hard drive company buying a flash company. And you have to sit there and you have to invest your time and energy to learn what you don't know and to become an expert of what you don't know. So that's, I think, the most exciting part about our role. It can be so wide and so varied. It all depends on where you take it and what you do with it.
Yeah. I was just listening to an episode. It just dropped, I think, last week with a friend of mine, Omid Gamami, who was talking about building these stakeholder relationships. He talked about this triangle of know, like, and trust that have to come together with your stakeholders. And what I hear you describing is something very similar, where you're building an understanding, you're working closely with them. When you face these new categories and these new stakeholders, did you approach it with a basic framework in mind, or was it just very natural for you in terms of building the competency in their business and building the relationship and then building the results? Tell me a little bit about how that worked out, and going back into a new category now, if you were opening up something that you hadn't done, what would be those practical insights that you would make, that you would suggest, to yourself or to somebody else going into that work?
So, yeah, it's the same steps that we'll take, just that today's situation is we have so many more resources to go and tap into. From a research perspective, you have tons of AI available just to research any topic and close a gap on any topic you might have. But I would do the same thing. I would tap into my stakeholder. I would tap into my IT business partner. Sometimes they've already sort of talked to your stakeholder. If it's technology related, they've already talked to the stakeholder they have some knowledge about this as well. I would talk to my team. There's, for example, if it's an engineering related, I have an engineering expert on the team that I would listen to them and what they know about this specific topic. So any additional people that you can build into your team of call it a project team that can help with what we need to go after, I think that's a welcome step to take. And I will try to do my research today. You just put a question into Gemini or chat and you ask them to tell you about a specific topic and they just tell you everything you need to know. So research is key. You, just like anything in life, you need to come prepared, and preparation builds your credibility and trust. If you come thinking that you don't need to do any preparation, then your stakeholder very, very quickly will lose their trust in what you can deliver. If you're coming with some level of understanding, you cannot come completely empty, thinking that they will invest all their time in you to bring you up to speed on what you need to know. You have to put the basic learning into it, and you have to come prepared. Like everything in life.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And if you think about the effort, I think back to the effort that I've invested in should cost analysis, breaking things down, figuring out what it should, how it should price out. And now looking at what we can do, we can build these little gems or bots or, agents and train them to how, what is a good should cost analysis and how do they do the research and how they look at it from different areas and come back and, present a report back to you. Things that would have taken, weeks and weeks or months to really get to the details, you can invest a little bit of time up front, that takes, frankly, the early versions of generative AI were a really nice step forward from a Google search, but the new capability to sort of train that search and train the output and train the AI to do something very specific for you it is stunning how quickly you can move from that kind of research now to, getting it in minutes or for sure hours and going back and really getting educated. And when you were talking, I was thinking about language in my traveling. I speak Spanish. I wish I spoke more languages, but just how much, when I am in a situation, how much more supportive people are when they interact with me when I'm speaking their language. And for sure, like you said, we're not going to be the experts that the stakeholders are in their category in their business, but our efforts, and not paltry efforts, like real efforts to get in and understand so that we can have a meaningful conversation, absolutely will be recognized and valued by our stakeholders. So this brings up a great question about AI versus human and how things are changing and how to think about it. So, I've wondered whether we're going to have, hey, my agent's negotiating against your agent. Have you seen that in practice yet? What's your view of where this is going to go, and what's your instinct here, right? Will my agent be able to beat your agent, or will they just go to some average place? Is your agent really based on kind of your incredible negotiation experience and mine is mine? Or what do you think is really going to happen here?
I think that we don't know how things will look like, 5 years from now. But at least in the next 2 to 3 years, I think that humans and agents will need to work together. And I think that as long as there's salespeople on the other side, if I'm looking at the big enterprise contracts, for example, for negotiations, as long as on my other side there's a Microsoft account manager or a Salesforce account manager or an SAP account manager, and they're coming to negotiate with me as a human, I think those negotiations will continue to be human to human. I think where it will be replaced is the more simple negotiations, the repetitive negotiations, the less strategic relationships that you can put an agent to an agent and just let it automate and be. But where you need to keep the strategic relationships, where you need to keep the core technology of each company, I think for the next few years, I think this will still be human to human, and agents will definitely take place and will become our workforce of the future. And I've seen, org charts that already incorporate agents as in a workforce environment, and all of this is great. And I think there's big room for agents to come in place and take a specific task or a specific workflow or a specific activity that they can go and fulfill. But first of all, someone needs to monitor the work that they're doing. Someone needs to continue and train the agents. Someone needs to continue and think through what else can they do? How do we take it to the next level? And then more complex negotiations that are the heart of the relationship and the heart of the business, the core business of each companies. I think that will still require humans.
There's no doubt that human in the loop right now makes a tremendous amount of sense. It's easy. It's easy for some confusion in the requirements or in the demand or other things. It could very easily lead to agents taking steps that are a little bit out of bounds. But I definitely have already started to see some, largely agentic negotiations, emailing back and forth with suppliers to update payment terms, and I can easily see, spot market sort of prices. Steel or aluminum or whatever. That's like the negotiation itself isn't as setting as much of a price because, it's more, placing orders and doing things like that. But there's some really cool things already happening. And I suspect that's going to continue. Just at the end of last year, Natasha made a prediction as part of our 2026 prediction episode. She said that, virtually all CPOs will be reconsidering their tech stack in the year ahead. And this was before, quite frankly, agents as we know them today are quite a bit different than what we knew 6 months ago, right? In January, February, March, when the OpenClaw agent kind of hit the world, and, I don't know that it took everyone by surprise, but it's a completely different kind of world now from an agent perspective than it was 6 or 8 months ago. So she was really insightful in making that prediction. When you think about the procurement world and the tech stack and the technologies, these aspects, is there anything that jumps out at you? Things to be cautious about or things to lean into? What's your observation here?
I would advise any procurement organization to do everything possible not to get into very long-term arrangements at the moment, because this is changing so quickly. And as you mentioned, this was just 6 months ago, and who knows how things are going to look 6 months from now. You might be investing now in a very big implementation that you think will take you for the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and you can find yourself outdated in a very, very short time, or really not with the latest technology in a very short time. So hopefully, if you're lucky, if you're like halfway through your contracts, obligations, and in a year from now, you'll be able to really be planning all these renewals, and then you have the next few months to a year to figure out where things are going and where you want to invest and how you want to invest. But it's just moving so fast, moving so quickly. And, thinking about implementing now a contracts lifecycle management platform when it might be outdated in 6 months, it's a little scary. So
yeah. Well, ERP updates are happening across the board, right? Everyone's moving to S/4HANA because of the kind of ECC being phased out.
Right.
In the procurement world, you're hitting on a great point. Like every 5 to 10 years, it seems like organizations finally get the investment to go update their systems. And if like you're in the middle of that right now, maybe last year you got budget, you got a plan, I agree with you. I kind of feel a little bit bad for the people that are ready to implement and go live today versus sort of put a pin in it, wait another 6, 12, 18 months and kind of see, because it feels like we really are at a turning point in how technology will work, how it will look. I'm increasingly convinced that the user experience of the at the enterprise level for the casual users will be some sort of Teams or Slack or something that looks and feels like that, a conversation interaction that will go off and execute things on your behalf. So it can order from catalogs, it could initiate an NDA, it can do all these things without you having to go through one tool or through many tools to go do this. So, I think so much talk about orchestration this last few years. I think, the agent driven experience is going to put a lot of pressure on the recent and current implementations around orchestration, because it'll just do it in such a more interesting and helpful way. I think
they're also expanding their offering. They're no longer just offering the orchestration piece. They're now going to other modules and offerings. So there's so much change at the moment that again, it really depends on where you are in your cycle of contracts renewals and implementations. But if you have another year to go, you're in a good spot to figure things out. In 6 months, hopefully, things will look very different.
Yeah. Well, a really nice practical tip for those of you out there that are listening is, there is this window where things are changing, and the window will open up again soon for you, if it isn't right now, to make one of these decisions or investments, right? The leadership teams all want to lean in on AI. So you might actually get the investment into your organization sooner than you think, and having the knowledge and insight to kind of know where you want to go. We've talked in the podcast before about actually, rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. You can't just delegate an understanding of the technology and the tools to people in your organization. Now more than ever, it's really critical for you to understand how these technologies work and interact with each other, because, Natasha was a real prophetess as she made that prediction, because I see it happening every day around me, with the rapid rate of change and everybody trying to figure out how they're going to adapt to these opportunities that are around them. So, I'm thinking back to what you were talking about in terms of, you were in this paper-based process from an accounting perspective, less people focused, less relationship focused, and then you pivoted into this procurement role because of your experience there. I want to talk a little bit about leadership as we kind of come around the corner here with the podcast as well. But what has been your experience in terms of the people side of procurement and leadership, and how was that a natural transition for you? Were there things that you needed to do to be more people oriented? For myself, I still claim to be an introvert, even though I find myself, doing the uncomfortable things that aren't very introverted these days, I don't really have a choice about. But your transition to move from less people-focused work in accounting to now very, very much people-focused. I mean, you've been a leader at all sorts of different levels, over time here, even in different cultures, right? Because if I remember right, you started at Sandisk in Israel, and then you came across to the Bay Area, right? Two very different cultural cultures and people. So was this just natural, or did you implement things to be more comfortable, on the people side of procurement?
I think over the years I've evolved and developed as a leader. I don't think that any of us is just born with all the answers to leadership. It's something that you need to work very hard at, and something that you need to continue and evolve. And I think over the years, yes, you mentioned I moved here with SanDisk and then got acquired by Western Digital, and then was exposed to even much greater, organization and many, many more cultures, because Western Digital has such a abundant footprint, and they have 10 factories in very different locations. And that has been an amazing leadership experience, really learning about all these different cultures, all these different people, way of doing things. And I found myself to be very curious about people, and I would ask questions. I will sit with them. I will listen to the stories, and really try to understand, what's there behind just the person. And this is something that I really love. I love the exposure. I love working with different people and different cultures, and I think that's what makes our job so much fun. Just being exposed to all these varieties and different ideas and different way of doing things. So, and I evolved over time. I've learned to listen more, and I've learned to ask more questions, and I've learned to be more sensitive to people's cultures. For example, you don't schedule a meeting on a Friday night with Israel, and you don't, you need to be sensitive to all the different holidays of all the different cultures that you work with. You don't ignore any of that. You embrace that. You understand what each culture cares mostly about. What are their priorities? What are their values that they cherish most? And you try to keep all of this in mind as you manage a big organization. I've managed 200 people at Western Digital, and made a good effort to be very sensitive to each culture and each location and the limitations, and the taboos, and what are the do's and don'ts with each and every culture. You do your best. You can't always, be 100% perfect at all times, but you really do your best. And this is something you need to continue and work on and improve at. All of us continue to improve as being leaders, as being parents, as being individuals. I mean, it's nothing that you just take a stab at and you're done. You continue to evolve yourself, and you continue to be better and aspire to be better in leadership and in everything you do in life. So it's part of the learning. You learn to be a better professional, and you learn to be a better leader over time.
Well, I think I love the word curious, and I think about how often sort of being closed-minded or being curious, what a difference maker it is. If you start thinking, you kind of understand everything, or that the world or your organization is going to sort of bend to your paradigm, or your culture, whatever it is, versus being curious and understanding and adapting. This is something I've really loved working with global teams as well. I feel like my life, it started as a young boy when I lived in the Middle East, but I feel like my life is so much richer because it's like this tapestry of bringing all of these ideas and insights, into who I am, and the relationships. The people I've met, the people I've, continue to interact with. You're a great example, Natasha and Zach. I could go through hundreds of people that are good friends of mine now over the years because we've had this interaction. And many of them are on my own, were on my teams, different kind of teams I've been in 20 years ago. I asked you a question a couple of weeks ago that really struck me when I asked you about your superpowers and what you think about leadership. You said that one of the really important things to do from a leadership perspective is to be brave. Talk to me a little bit about what that means to you, the bravery of leadership.
It means you need to make the hard decisions. You need to lead the way for your team, even if it's not the easiest way. You need to be in the tough conversations, even if it's not so pleasant. You can't It's part of leading by example. You can't expect someone to walk the walk and talk the talk if you don't do it yourself. And you can't expect someone else to do your hard work or your unpleasant conversations if you cannot do it yourself. So you have to be very mindful to what's going on in the organization. And you have to be a go-to for your team for any challenging discussions or environments, or just a sounding board, just someone they can talk to. You have to be there for all the hard times and hard moments, and there's a lot of them in the cyclical environments. And after every upturn, there's a downturn, and there's always pressure on saving costs and budgets and reductions. If you've been enough years in this industry, you know that there's always something that is happening, and you need to provide your confidence to your team and be trustworthy and be someone they can trust through the great times and the tough times.
You know, I'm sure I'm not the only person to have joked when something is difficult happening. I say to my colleague, that's why they pay you the big bucks. And I think early in my career, I didn't adequately appreciate the difficulties that you're talking about. I mean, it is a privilege to grow in the organization and be at a leadership level and be rewarded at a leadership level. I mean, that's, that was my personal career strategy, not to have a bunch of side hustles, just to come into the enterprise, work my tail off day in and day out, be very focused, and then grow up through the function into a leadership role where I would be, better compensated. And it all worked off. It all worked great until I left and started my own business and went right back to the bottom of the the compensation ladder. But it is, that's, there's some really hard things. And as you were talking, one of them that came to my mind is, we all have a bad night's sleep. We all have challenges at home. We all have difficulties. And from a leadership perspective, part of what came to me from a Bravery's perspective is you don't, as a leader, really have the luxury of showing up to work grumpy because you got a ticket on the way to work, or, maybe you had a disagreement with your spouse or partner or kids at home, or something happened, and you walk into the office, and what you bring to you what you bring the office from a tone perspective carries across to, dozens or hundreds of people in your meetings. Like, they pick up on that. And so if you feel entitled to show up at work as a leader grumpy because something that happened, while you were gone, it's just such a negative impact to the organization. And so you kind of have to fake it until you make it, and, say, no, I'm not, I'm going to show up day in and day out with, energy and optimism and positive energy instead of all the negative emotions that we're all feeling. I mean, if you get a ticket on the way to work, you're not feeling happy when you show up at the office, right? Or worse things than that happen all the time. And it takes a lot of courage and commitment to actually do that. And yeah, those aren't even the hardest parts, right? In terms of really making it work. I've got a lot of respect for leaders that take that responsibility seriously. I've said many times to my team that I think it's like a sacred responsibility. The way that you treat people through the good things and the bad things can have a very, very direct and long-lasting impact on them personally. The way they view themselves, their self-confidence. Sometimes I imagine, you go have a really unfair conversation with somebody and they carry that negative energy home, and they kick the cat, they yell at their kids, all the things that can happen. And I'm not saying any of that's justified. I'm just saying that the ripple effect of us, not being really great leaders, has a lasting consequence on people at an individual level, and a family level, and an organizational level. I'm sure that you went through, as you arrived through these learnings, I'm sure you went through, like I did, many difficult, hard learnings yourself, and trying to do it right, but probably doing it wrong from time to time. One of the other things you mentioned when we were talking is the importance of really good and clear expectations from a leadership perspective. At Intel in their management training, they had this model called the management task cycle, and I thought it was really, I still think it's maybe the best model I've ever seen, because it basically lays out management into 6 steps. The first one is setting clear goals and expectations. The second one is planning and problem solving. And then the third one is facilitating the work of others. And what you see as you start applying this principle, like those are very clear, 3 very clear ways up front, where making sure people know what's expected, communicating it clearly to them, helping them with planning and problem solving, and then helping them start on the execution process. All of those draws alignment back to what are we trying to accomplish here? Like, what's the message? So the kind of repetition you're talking about is this constant focus on, this is what the goals and expectations are. 80% of the time, if people understand what the goals and expectations are, like you said, like figure it out mindset, tenacity, or whatever, even if as a manager you have other awkward aspects about your management, if their goals and expectations are clear, the probability of them delivering to those goals and expectations is massively higher. If the goals and expectations are not clear, the probability of them meeting them is very low, right? Just that one thing that you're talking about really does make all the difference. I have a number of questions. I just like quick response questions I want to ask you. But before I get there, I'm curious if you think this bravery, you talked a little bit about it, but do you think this bravery personality trait or leadership trait is something that some people are born with, or can they learn bravery? Because you're right. A lot of people are uncomfortable having these, particularly in different cultures, having these difficult conversations. If I'm out there listening and I'm going, yeah, I don't like that either, and I'm really struggling with that, is there hope for that person to get more courage, more bravery, more experience? Can I learn this thing? Or I'm kind of like, no, you probably should go back to being an individual contributor because you just don't have the bravery.
I don't know of course, this is something that you can get more comfortable with, but it really needs to be part of your sort of characteristics and traits. I think being a woman also in procurement, in operations, big tech, I mean, you have to have the confidence. You have to be brave. I mean, I remember many occasions where I was the only woman in the room, and you have to make sure you're communicating with full confidence, and you know what you came to talk about, and the belief that you can do anything and everything, and especially with your stakeholders. I mean, if you come to a stakeholder and you don't show confidence in what they need and cannot speak their language and close the gap on what they're trying to go and source, and you're like a step behind, then you're going to stay a step behind. So you have to believe that you can speak to anyone, buy anything, do anything that you're required to do with your leadership role. If you're not confident in yourself that you can do this, that you know what you're there to do, that you can master any deal or be as the great collaborator to any stakeholder and talk to executives on what your team needs, why they need it, go fight for budget, go fight for resources, make decisions about technology investments, make decision about how the team is going to move from point A to B, build roadmaps for your team. If you're not confident in all of this, that you can lead the way for your team and you can tackle all those challenges that coming at you, then you're going to be miserable.
I'm going to read between the lines a little bit there. What I think I hear you saying, particularly at the beginning, is believe in yourself, right? Believe in yourself. It's okay. If you're starting to if some of these things are difficult, you're not feeling brave enough, that's okay. That's sort of normal. Even the most talented speakers and performers talk about feeling anxious and nervous. Like we all feel these kind of nerves, and this probably is one of those fake it till you make it moments. Start sooner than later to do things that are difficult and get comfortable with doing difficult things. And you'll find soon enough that even though you're feeling all these nerves inside you, after a public speech or after a presentation, you're getting positive feedback, and you realize that, you do have the capability to do hard things. I think, by the way, I'm a girl dad. I have 3 daughters, so I've got a lot of appreciation for, those of you that have sort of, if not shattered the glass ceilings, you're definitely banging on them and opening up new places for women to be successful and have opportunities across business. So, shout out and thank you for that. So, some rapid fire questions. So, quick answers on these as we wrap up. What do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years? Is the CPO going to spend more time talking to their lead negotiator or to their lead AI prompt engineer?
The CPO, I think, will continue to talk to their lead negotiator. The lead negotiator will talk to their AI prompts, because I think CPOs will have a layer of people that is reporting into them, managing their AI and agents, and not necessarily the CPO will need to talk to the agents, but there will be enough people on the team that will need to talk to the agents and create more agents and train them and incorporate them into their workforce.
Yep. Well, I hope you're right. I hope the CPOs aren't just talking to machines and they're talking to leaders.
I hope so.
I suspect we're all going to be talking to these agents and computers. I mean, I see it increasing in my life, but yeah, I hope life continues to have people in it, because it's so. And
it depends on the size of your organization.
So tell me, something that you said to me really struck me when we were speaking before. You talked about innovation and status quo. Tell me a little bit about that. Rapid fire here. How has that influenced things? Well, let me change it a little bit to keep it simpler. So what is the holy cow or the sacred cow, right, that procurement should go attack right now from a status quo perspective to make the biggest difference?
There's so many things that we can already go and tackle right now that can save so much time on the day-to-day tactical repetitive work that the procurement folks will want and appreciate. That I think we need to build that and cut our cycle time, because very soon your stakeholder will have a different patience to your cycle time. And if you can take those steps now to build agents to do all the prep work for RFPs, and then your RFP cycle time now gets shortened by half of the time because you've already have someone else doing all the prep work, just as an example, then you took the action before your stakeholder, was asking you to take the action. So whatever we can do now to understand where we can cut our cycle time and take those steps to do that, we should. And hey, I've always been in organizations that was asked to do more with less. So it's not necessarily you go and you reduce your people. You're just providing your team the bandwidth so they can focus on the deals with the highest value for their stakeholders, and building relationship with stakeholders and understanding what the stakeholders need to do and what they need to go after, and just have some alleviation of the day-to-day work that they might not need to do.
Yeah. Well, Limor, I've loved this conversation. I'm thinking about you just coming out of school. a couple of decades ago, whenever that was, with an accounting degree and just getting into buyer level jobs in defense and then moving across to technology and then moving across the world and going through all these steps. It's an inspiration in terms of what can be done with common sense, determination, bravery, and really a just get it done attitude that you described. I think that's fantastic. So let me just do a quick wrap up right now. I want
to say something.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
A good leader is as good as the team behind him. I could haven't done any of this without the support and the great team that I've nourished and developed over the years. And I was lucky to work with some of the best people in this industry. So you have part of leadership is also you need to recognize who are the people that will help you to continue and grow and how you can grow with them. Because in a team of 200 people, I mean, you cannot do it on yourself. You have to ensure that there's a team there with the same philosophy or the same mindset to help you grow and to help you take the organization forward.
There's almost, I'm thinking about my career, there's almost nothing as rewarding as that moment when the right people, the right team are together, focused and aligned on achieving that outcome. The expectations are clear. You've got the right people. You've got the right energy. You've got the right commitment. There's this harmony that sort of comes together inside the team where everybody is in a place where they can do the very best work of their career. And when a leader can create that culture and they can create that environment, it's magic. And it is so cool. So thank you for calling that out. So a lot of practical tips in here, folks, to walk away from this podcast. I would suggest maybe a couple of key items here. Understand and define the critical expectations, the goals. Like that expectation setting up front is really critical. Think about maybe who an important stakeholder is for you to meet that you haven't met with. Get prepared for the conversation. For me, I know it was always difficult to go meet with the CMO or to go meet with the CFO or to go meet with these senior people. You are better, you are more capable, and you are better prepared to help the business than you can imagine. So have the confidence, have the bravery, schedule that conversation and go do it. Limor, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I appreciate your insight and your example to procurement practitioners everywhere, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conrad. It was my pleasure.
All right, everybody, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share so we can make this podcast and our other podcasts more available to procurement leaders. And have an amazing rest of your day.